Welcome to This Week in Plymouth with the Plymouth Town Manager, Derek Brindisi. Hi, Derek.
Hi, Julie. Good to be back.
Good to have you. Let's take this opportunity to talk about the last 6 months, because you've been here just about 6 months here in Plymouth.
That's right.
Talk about some of the highs and the lows and the in-betweens.
Well, that's a timely question, given the board's most recent vote to extend my contract. And so this question gives me an opportunity to kind of look back at my first 6 months here in the town of Plymouth and all the things that have happened.
Can I ask you on that point, that
Sure.
they extended your contract? Was your initial contract just for 6 months?
No, my initial contract was for 3 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And what made them come back and offer you a longer stretch?
I think part of it has to do with the select board. They're very intentional on their goals and priorities that we've talked about, all the different goals and priorities they have. And many of those goals stretch beyond 3 years. And so the board really felt as a whole, it's probably important to have some consistency and some stability in the position. So let's make sure that the contract covers the same time period of our goals. So I think that was one thing. And, we've done a lot of work in the first 6 months.
You sure have. The list is pretty big. So let's go through it. The first part was really bittersweet when you first got here, because we lost Pearl Sears within a couple of weeks of when you got here.
Yeah, so that was really a challenging time for me, because I had started right about the full time right around March 14th, and Pearl had passed unexpectedly within the first 2 weeks of my arrival. And again, when I look back at some of these occurrences during my first 6 months, one of my abilities to be able to react to some of these difficult times has been the fact that I knew a lot of these people. I know the names. And so, I worked with Pearl for a few years when I was here. And, Pearl and I always had a great relationship. And we had been emailing prior to her passing saying, hey, we can't wait to get together. We're going to talk about all the things you're doing down there. She was excited. In fact, I think I got an email from her the night before she passed away of how she was excited to work with me. So that was really tough, because although I had been here before, it was really difficult, and, trying to work with the staff and kind of leading us through this mourning period. So that was a difficult time, and especially being so new.
We were lucky that our most recent town clerk came in and filled in for a while, and then you hired a town clerk from where you were before, correct? Yeah,
so Kelly McElrath, 22 years experience in town clerk and local government. So she was excited for the opportunity to work in a community like Plymouth. And she's loving it, honestly. She says to me on a regular basis, I'm so happy I made this decision. Working in one community for 20 plus years, sometimes you get stuck in your habits, you don't want to leave. But this is a new opportunity for her. She just recently moved in town, so she's really excited, and she's doing great things.
She's all in.
Yeah.
So you had your first annual town meeting being here.
Yeah, so again, this goes back to my first 30 days, right? First 30 days in government, and I'm coming into a time where the warrant had already been set, the budget had already in essence been approved, and so there's a lot of buildup, as you know, for a town meeting.
Right.
And I was just kind of thrown in the middle of that, and being asked a lot of questions that honestly I didn't really have the answers for, because I didn't prepare the warrant, I didn't prepare the budget. But I was able to rely on Lee Hartman, who filled in as the acting town manager, who did an amazing job, who he's probably sick of me saying I call him my consigliere, because I always go to him and say, I call him up, we close the door, I'm like, hey, let's chat, and so he gives me good advice. He's been working for the town for 20 plus years, and so he's seen it all. So, being able to rely on people like Lee Hartman and Lynn Barrett, our finance director, they're been the rocks of town hall for many, many years. So, that was my advantage heading to the annual town meeting.
Yep, excellent. So did you find that the town meeting that we had, that obviously it was a virtual town meeting, how did you think that went compared to the meetings that you had in a smaller town?
So that annual town meeting was the marathon, an 11.5-hour meeting. It was virtual, so I felt like there was a lot of conversations that were taking place over and over and over, and I felt like, can't we just get to the question at hand? allow people to ask their questions. Let's give them a response to their questions, and let's drive forward. So,
Right.
I hope that we can find a happy medium of trying to be able to be responsive to the questions of town meeting members, but at the same time be a little more efficient. It's almost like a Major League Baseball game. We all love Major League Baseball, but does it have to be 4.5 hours long?
Right.
There are things we can do to make it a little bit
Put
faster.
a guy on second when you go into extra
Exactly.
innings, right?
Let's put a pitch count.
Yeah, speed it up. Okay. Now, you've seen a couple things come up in your tenure so far that have been quite controversial. One is the Woodlot and, of course, horse racing. Talk about that.
Yeah, so this, again, goes back to like all these different sequence of events or milestones that have happened to me in my first 6 months. And, we just get out of town meeting. Once we get out of town meeting, as administrators and department staff are like, okay, we can take a deep breath. We can start getting back to the business of town government. And no sooner will we get back to the business of town government, the select board called a special town meeting, which then we started talking about 46 Sandwich Road.
Yeah.
But in between that time of calling a special town meeting, this issue of the county woodlot came up.
Right.
And so again, became controversial. The board didn't have a lot of information. And I think if we could have, to do that all over, we would have spent more time understanding what Boston South wanted to do, requiring them to come to the Board of Selectmen with a very detailed proposal of what their thoughts are and what their expectations are from the Select Board. And so, this didn't happen that way and created a lot of undue concern.
Right.
And let's see, that was April, so here we are 4 months later, and now I think we're just getting to the point where, given the Gaming Commission's new licensing application, that people are starting to feel better that there's no way a horse racing facility can take place here in town without many different approvals, many different checks and balances that need to take place. So again, another difficult time, combusting a lot of energy, focusing on something that really should have been treated like any other development here in town.
And as you say that, it brings to mind that this happens a lot now in all local governments. One subject or even two subjects seems to take over an entire town for an amount of time, which seems really futile. And it's not a good use of payroll hours. It's not a good use of people's time. Moving forward, how would you like to see, when things like this come up, how can we change that? The approach to something that may be controversial, or maybe a lot of people weigh in on it.
I think it's just like trying to be proactive and get good information out there in advance.
Right.
I attended a meeting with a regional retirement group, PRIA they're called, and I spent 10 minutes saying, if you have a question, and I say this all the time on the show, please call me. Don't hesitate, but call me. Don't listen to social media.
Yeah.
Don't listen to Facebook, because 90% of the time, it's all false information. So, and there were a few people who had sent me emails over my first 6 months and said that, I am responsive to questions. So, but we have to do a better job. I can't be the person, responding to 65,000 residents, right? So we have to do a better job in town government of getting that information out on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And that we have a lot of good plans in the next 6 months that we plan on doing.
Okay.
And it's all going to start at the fall town meeting.
Okay.
Once we get some of these approvals from town meeting members, we hope we can start to enact some of these measures.
Okay, we'll talk about those in a few.
Sure.
So let's talk about fall town meeting. There's some controversy about fall town meeting in terms of its location and the amount of rooms that have to be used for the town meeting that the moderator is asking for.
Right.
How do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, so this is one of those. It's like the horse racing. It's unfortunately has taken control of our work day in and day out. It's taken on a life of its own, and honestly, the board said when we talked about this special town meeting in June that this would be the last virtual town meeting that they will support, and the board 5-0 voted to have an in-person town meeting.
Right.
The moderator wanted virtual. There's a lot of back and forth debate taking place of like what will a in-person town meeting look like. The moderator now has landed that he wants 3 3 different rooms. He wants the main auditorium to be for town meeting members who don't need the social distancing, who don't need the mask wearing, and to allow them to go there. A second room would be for those folks that are worried about COVID, they're
Sure.
worried about their health.
Yep.
We'll have social distancing in place. We'll have mask wearing in place.
Yep.
We'll have all the protective measures that the moderator can think of will
Yep.
be in that room.
Sure.
We will make sure that that's a safe environment for all our town meeting members. But then there's the controversial third room,
Right.
This is the room that the moderator wants the Board of Selectmen to be in. He wants the Administration and Finance Committee
Yep.
members to be in. He wants myself and department staff to be
Right.
in that room.
Right.
He does not want or allow, doesn't think it's appropriate for those people to be with town meeting members, which has created some controversy because, all those people I just named, the vast majority of them are residents of this community, and they
Right.
want to be with their town meeting member colleagues. So that's really been the struggle here, and I honestly I think it's really the moderator looking at the different statutes, regulations, the charter to try to find evidence in where he can require such, and that's really been what's consuming a lot of our time.
Right, which is really not a good use of anyone's time at this point. There's so many things that the town needs to do and has to do, has to get done.
This is, as you know, a very busy, complicated community.
Yep.
And when I'm spending 50% of my day just trying to unravel this issue about fall town meeting, it's not a good use of my time, it's not a good use of town council's time, it's not a good use of staff time, because this is stuff that is pretty straightforward, we would think reasonable accommodations that we can make for all of our town meeting members.
Right, okay. We'll leave it at that one. New staff, let's talk about the new staff that has been brought on ever since you started.
Yeah, so that's great. So that's a really positive story because, it's not often when you become a town manager, you can build your own team,
Yep.
right? And so I had the opportunity to build half of my team. And the other half, who are the Lynn Barretts, the David Goulds, the
Lee Hartmans,
Jonathan Beaters, they bring so much wealth and decades of knowledge. You can't have one without the other. You don't want all new staff and all veterans, right?
Yep.
So I've been able to kind of have this hybrid of right.
Staff,
That's the word of the year, hybrid. Where we've been able to bring in a new assistant town manager,
Yep.
right? Because that was a vacancy
Brad
when I came
Brothers,
on
yep.
board. Brad Brothers,
Yep.
doing great work.
Yep.
Came from the school
Department.
We've been able to appoint a new fire chief, and Neil Foley got
Yep.
appointed in April.
Yep.
Bringing new fresh ideas to the department. Chief Flynn, although he predates my arrival, he's only been a police chief for maybe a year now, so fairly new to his role, and
Yeah.
he got a brand new command staff,
Yeah.
a new assistant DPW director in Sheila Scarzi,
Yeah.
a new town clerk, we just mentioned Kelly McElrath. So there's been a number of new people
A new
in
climate position?
climate resiliency
Yeah.
planner with Mark Rail, who's, again, it's a new position, we've never had it before, so bringing fresh ideas. And again, bringing in these individuals that come from other communities, they bring in different perspectives
Sure.
on how to do business.
Sure.
Mark Rail, he was the legislative director at the state level, so he brings all that kind of policy making experience, but was also a selectman in the town of Mendon, so he brings a local perspective. So I'm really lucky because I can lean on all of them and say, hey, what do you think about this? And they bring in fresh ideas, and we have these meetings every Tuesday with our department staff, so it's great to see the veterans of Plymouth working with the new fresh faces and them exchanging ideas on a regular basis. And I can tell you one thing, we are going to do great things. I can guarantee you. And
No doubt. With a good brain trust. Yeah.
And I would always say in my last community that my promise to the community I worked in last year and previous years was that I promised that we will do better next year than we did today.
Yep.
So as long as we continue down that continuum, that every single year we're going to do better, we'll always do great things.
And let's talk about Anthony. Talk about a good somebody good to bring in.
Yeah, Anthony Sinesi. So, I've talked a lot. I think probably the first time I came here,
Yeah.
when I spoke with Donna,
he's new.
I talked to her about
Yeah.
we got to have communications. So we took a vacancy, the administrative staff position. We kind of like jumbled it all up,
Yeah.
made a new job description, and he's been a big focus on our communications. And Anthony Sinesi, again, guy who came from the town of Weston,
Yep.
so affluent community, came here and said, we can do better.
Right.
And so he's totally changed that position and the way we do business around communications and how we really trying to be more focused on the message that we send on a regular basis.
Right. Okay. Now, before we talk about goal setting for going forward, let's talk about the 6 months that you've had here to really kind of look under the hood and see what works. How would you describe the town SWOT, the strengths, the weaknesses, or areas for improvement, as some people would say, opportunities and threats that the town of Plymouth sees right now?
So I would say our strength is in our staff. I talked about the administration, but if you go throughout town hall and you go to the Cal and you go to the library, like we have great staff. Like that is definitely, I would say, our strength. And the select board did a great job in making sure that all of our staff, from frontline staff all the way to administration, are being paid fairly, which has gone a long way with recruiting new staff. So I would say that's certainly one of our strengths. I think that another strength the town of Plymouth has versus other towns is we have resources. A lot of towns don't have resources, so we don't always have to do the work, but can we rely on our community partners, our nonprofits in the community, some of the other businesses that want to work with the town, and rely on them to help us kind of pull this together, this thing we call the town of Plymouth, right?
Right.
So
you're talking about like the chamber and the economic development and See Plymouth. You're talking about all those different
nonprofits.
Right.
Yeah, like Chamber's been great. Amy Naples is great. Stephen Cole.
Yeah.
Lee Philson has been great from See Plymouth. But even some of the other organizations that like you wouldn't normally think of, like the Plymouth Philharmonic.
Oh yeah.
I've been working.
Yeah.
I probably talked to Kim Corbin more than most others in the community.
They're amazing.
A huge partner in this community that like those are the folks that are the strengths of this community that I really want to start to try to weave them all together so we can all work towards one common goal. So I would say that's a strength. One of our weaknesses, I would say two things, and I try to be careful with this, is our processes. I honestly say that we could spend 2 years just making government, so the business of town hall, more efficient.
Sure.
There's a number of things that we should be doing, and we should be doing better. For a budget of $300 million, I am surprised how often a department head says, "Hey, do you know we gotta fix this? Do you know we were doing this wrong for all these years?" And then, it becomes a discussion at department meetings. So then I say, okay, let's do it. Let's create a policy.
Yep.
We got to fix it. We'll probably spend the next 2 years just reviewing our policies, our procedures, and our bylaws. Because a lot of them are antiquated, they're contradictory of the things that we're already doing. So, I mean, I get excited about making government more efficient.
Yeah.
That's probably one thing I really pride myself on, is like, what can we do to make government more efficient?
Right. And you have to kind of future-proof that, because technology changes and all the things that you rely on can go at the same rate that you're going. So it's a very exciting time, I would think, for Plymouth.
And you have to pay attention to it. To your point about technology, what a decision. I just said this. We had an unbelievable meeting last week. It was all the department heads and all the division heads.
Yeah.
I brought them all together and we talked about the direction that we're headed in.
Yeah.
And I said, like, look, this isn't a knock on decisions you guys made back in 2012.
Right.
But technology has changed. You may have made this decision because it made good sense at the time. Well, now we're in 2022.
Yeah.
So let's revisit that, and let's, like, if we have to make improvements, as you call it, areas of improvement, let's do it. There's nothing stopping us from doing that.
All right. So your threats?
I would say one of my biggest concerns would be just being able to recruit future staffing. We see that as a concern of mine. Succession planning is a major concern of mine, because you can't have succession planning if you don't have people coming in behind you.
Right.
Right. So When I started here in March, we had 47 vacancies. That didn't include fire or the police department.
Yeah.
So 47 vacancies in town government, and then an additional at the time, we had about 20 vacancies in the police department. I think about a half a dozen
Yep.
on the fire department. So, for a community this size, if you have 75 vacancies,
Yeah,
that's
that's a
a
lot.
lot.
Yeah.
So that's a concern of mine. That's something we have to pay attention to. Silvio Gennaro, our new HR director, he did a great presentation with staff last week around the things that he wants to do to try to build back, this very strong from frontline staff all the way to administrators. So that's a concern of mine.
Okay. And opportunities?
Opportunities, I would say opportunities to be creative. Like, I think we have to be creative. I think that we have to think about new ways of doing business, which is what I really get excited about, because Plymouth has the resources to be creative, to really be, and I said this last week to staff, like, the town of Plymouth should be the gold standard when it comes to town government in
Cutting
Massachusetts.
edge. It could
and,
be.
and I'm serious about that. I don't just say this stuff because it's my job to say this stuff. I don't say anything unless I mean it. Like, I honestly hope in 5 years from now, we get phone calls from around the state and say, what are you guys doing on this issue? What are you guys doing on that issue?
Right.
Because we have a big budget, that doesn't mean that we're hitting on all those metrics.
Right. Okay.
You know?
So today you just came here from receiving a $2 million grant. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so let me start by saying that large credit goes to David Gould, the Director of Marine and Environmental Affairs, because David's always got his eye on money.
Yes.
Right? One thing, David got a $25 million grant a couple months ago. So,
He's good at this.
He's great at it. So, him and his team members are Karen McCall and Tiffany Park, who's our grant writer. The three of them put their heads together. They saw that there was an opportunity to bring in some money to help stabilize a portion of Long Beach through a beach nourishment program. So $2 million was announced today, and this $2 million will go towards Long Beach beach nourishment. It is the largest grant the Coastal Management Department has given in its history, $2 million. And the town of Plymouth was the recipient of that $2 million grant. So very excited. Again, all the credit goes to like David and like thinking where we need to be. He doesn't think about where we need to be in 6 months from now. He's thinking about where we need to be in 10 years from now. So great work by David and Tiffany and Karen to be able to bring that money home.
That's awesome. Now, what are you thinking about for goal setting and plans for the next 6 months?
So we have our goals that are going to carry us again through the next 4 to 5 years. But I'm thinking for the next 6 months, if I had like a crystal ball, the budget discussion is going to be a big one this year. I plan on, and I talked about it this afternoon at an event I attended, that I want to be very public about, and not to say it hasn't been in the past, but I plan on being out as many events as possible to talk about not the budget so much, because we'll talk about that, that's just naturally occurring, but the budget process. And I think it's really important for people to understand how our revenues come into town and how our revenues are quickly consumed by our fixed costs.
Right.
And so last week at our department division head meeting, I had asked Lynn Barrett to just give staff a primer on this budget. And I had a couple, department heads and division heads who came up to me and said, I had no idea. So, and that's in town hall.
Sure.
So if town hall staff don't understand how the budget is made, they don't see the sausage being made, then it's very difficult for them to understand why we make the decisions we make when it comes to budget priorities. So for the next the next 4 months, plan on doing a lot of time talking to community groups around how we establish the budget. So that's one thing, and the other big piece is really around the community engagement piece. The whole website redesign, if town meeting approves it, how we're going to start tracking our work, through the 311 system. I really think some of those are going to be game changers when it comes to how we communicate with the public and how we hold ourselves accountable
Yeah.
to all the needs of the public. And then in saying all that, I guess like kind of the overarching theme is just getting people to understand that like you can ask for everything you want,
Right.
but there's only so much money and for us to
Exactly.
deliver those services. So we have to really start to prioritize, those things that people say they need.
Right. But an educated consumer is probably the most important thing you could have right now. If they just understand the way all of this works and the way one thing depends on another thing. And if you don't mind, in the last couple of minutes, I would love to talk to you about the fact that you're a lieutenant colonel in the near Air National Guard. I found that fascinating because working with you over the past 6 months here at PACTV and seeing how you operate, it informs a lot about how you operate. Can you talk about your service and how you think it might affect the way you run the town?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for asking. So my current rank is a lieutenant colonel, and I'm in the Air National Guard. I'm right outside of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. It's a small air base called Pease Air National Guard Base. I've been a commissioned officer at Pease since 2009. However, I started my military career right out of high school at age 18 when I joined the Air Force. So I joined the Air Force at age 18, spent a few years as enlisted. I had a break-in service. I actually did 2 years in the Army, too. I don't talk about that much. But then I had another break-in service, which allowed me to get commissioned up at Pease. So I've been serving at Pease since 2009. And so to your question about how that work informs me, so I would say that, especially, it's great when I'm able to talk to fire and police because I get it, right?
Yeah.
They understand
Yep.
command and control.
Yep.
They understand structure. They understand that if you have a problem with your supervisor, you address your supervisor first, and you try to remedy problems at the lowest level. And I said this last week with staff. I'm like, listen, if something has gotten to my level, we got a problem.
Yeah.
Like it works in everyone's best interest. If you see a problem, resolve it at your level, whatever level that is. It doesn't matter. You could be frontline staff, you could be mid-level managers, you could be administrators. But if you can resolve it at the lowest level, then you've done a couple of things. You solved the problem for one of our residents, and hopefully they're a happy resident, and you're demonstrating that like you can troubleshoot issues because someday you're going to be a manager, and someday you're probably going to be a department head. So I'm a big believer of resolving things at the lowest level. I'm a big believer in that we have structure, and that if we follow the chain of command.
Yeah.
And then if you can follow those principles, I think that it kind of cuts away all the chaos that's around you.
Right.
And so I think that's been one of the things that I've learned a lot about being in the military, because I can tell you one thing, like you don't go to your commander directly. Like it doesn't happen that way.
Right.
And the other thing too I learned in the military is when you say you're going to start at 0900 and you're going to end at 1000, guess what? You start at 0900 and you end at 10.
Yeah. The discipline is.
There's no. And the other thing too, real quick before we break, I do enjoy going. I went to drill for a week this past year to do annual training. I had all, my enlisted force with me, and we had 15 minutes of downtime. And I says, okay, we got 15 minutes of downtime. Go get everybody, use that 15 minutes, go unpack the trailers and bring everything up here.
Yep.
Now, in some civilian sectors, everybody would want to debate that. Everybody stood up.
Yeah.
They went to the trailers, they unpacked the trailers, and they
right
burned
back.
it up.
Yeah.
And they
There you
still
go.
had 10 minutes of
And there you
downtime
go.
to have
You
a
get
break.
it done. Right.
You got
right.
it done. And
Okay.
I remember texting one of the board members. I said, I kind of miss this.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Well,
this
slowly.
is the mission.
This is the mission,
Yep,
right? And that's
let's go get it.
we have to do here in Plymouth. Well, congratulations on the extension of your contract. That's wonderful.
Yeah, no, thank you, and I'm
Yeah.
happy to be here. Again, I really love working in Plymouth, and
Yeah.
I hope to be here for many years to come.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate
This has
it.
been Derek and Julie and Plymouth Today.